spiritual power or spiritual masculinity. Because spiritual masculinity is, if before I take you to the spiritual one, we need to define it from the physical. The physical means you have that physical fortitude. You are in control of your body, first of all. To be physically strong, you need to be first be in control of your body. The weakest people can't even lift their own bodies. They can't even lift themselves. So one of the examples of physical power, physical strength, is basically about control. And when one engages in any form of fighting or training and fighting, one is taught all about controlling your body. Controlling your body becomes the before you can get to a point where you can control another person's physical body. So that is the essence of what it means to have physical strength. So um, when you then come, so it's all about controlling self control. That is the essence of power or strength, and therefore at the center of masculinity we have self control. So where you're physically strong, Samson fails is that he can control his body, control his enemies, take control of the whole situation physically, but spiritually, mental fortitude, he is no longer in control because his emotions then come into taking control, because you emotions and mental power, they tend to oppose each other, because when a person is physically strong, they or rather mentally strong. So as an example, so in fighting, when fighters are trained, what happens is one of the most important things is they teach you to control your emotions. Never get angry is one of the things that they teach to the initiates of martial arts or boxing. And one of the most powerful things is you need to get your opponent angry. It's one of the tactics that one uses in you can ask any trained fighter, they'll tell you that you get your opponent angry and you remain calm, because you cannot be what's this, when you're intellect, you cannot be angry and intelligent at the same time, unless you can control your anger. Not that you can't be angry at all, but if you're not in control of your emotions, your IQ drops at that time when your emotions take over. You cannot have high emotions and high IQ at the same time. That's why people tend to have this excuse that, oh no, I didn't mean what I said, I was angry, and things like that. So 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 when we compare the heart and the mental, it's just like the concept of uh, uh, cognitive dissonance. You can show someone facts, that's mental. Facts and logic. Logic and emotions usually don't go in hand in hand. And when the other is, one has to be stronger than the other. And when the mental overcomes the emotions or the heart, one becomes logical. But when the emotions take over, the logic has to then take second place. And so in this case, mental fortitude as a concept of masculinity becomes um, something that is diminished in terms of masculinity. So we even have, since we're talking about a biblical allegory, I'll even use a scriptural example with Solomon, one of the Proverbs of Solomon. He says that do not give your strength to women. That can be used because a lot of people can interpret that in many ways. Do not give your strength to women. That would mean that do not give your masculinity to women, as in, if you give your mental fortitude to a woman, it means you have given that, just like Samson, he's given his secret. His secret was part of a warrior, never shares the secret of his power. So that is his mental fortitude. So he gave that strength to a woman, and that led to his destruction. So that, if we look at, yeah. So before I actually go into that part of the subject, and we can even see practically out there many examples that if we look at a person like Samson, imagine Samson was a king of your clan. I don't think anybody would feel safe about having a king like Samson, because if he's in love with the beauty of the enemy, you guys are in trouble. This is the man who is supposed to be the protector of your people, but his weakness is the beauty of the enemy, just like Samson. So when we look at the whole concept of masculinity, and in terms of, if we look at African kingships, since I mentioned the kingships in Africa, generally, I'm talking about your basic matrilineal systems, because we didn't have what do you call this, one uniform or system, or what is the monolith type of systems in Africa. It's just that the matrilineal was the dominant one. We did have matriarchal. We also had some patriarchal systems, and so on, But the dominant ones were obviously, if you're gonna study African civilizations, those were mainly your matrilineal systems, and those were forged around the lion pride. Hence, in many of our languages in Africa, there is a word for a lion king. You don't have it in English. The word lion king in English is two words. You have to have translated it in two words. But in African languages, there is a one word for the lion king. And that word is used to call the actual king, a human king. Like the Zulu king is called Ingonyama. A lion, the general word for a lion is Ibubis, but the lion king is Ingonyama. The king of the kingdom of Eswatini is called Ingwenyama. And I'm sure people can give various examples from their cultural backgrounds, the Baganda. I know they also have a word, I just don't remember it. I know one of the brothers I've invited from Uganda. Perhaps he can, help us with the word. So when we look at the lion pride, the the man and his the lion king has to be he has to have a very strong center, in the sense that he builds a pride with these lionesses and the cubs, and his job is to protect the pride, and he can only do that if his masculinity is in place. He cannot now be some lioness coming in and be used by some lion from the outside that was defeated. He's an alpha. He's an alpha male. And the term alpha male generally means he's the most dominant male. And physically, the black man is the most dominant male in general, you know. As however, the black male today is the most dominated. Hence the different movies like your King Kong and your stories of Samson and Enter that I've given an example of. So the missing link there is the spiritual fortitude, the mental fortitude, you know. And we during many the years when they were creating stereotypes about black men, they said a black man's weakness is just is his appetite, you know. He has a huge cojones, a huge penis, and all he wants is a white woman, you know. So they know that a black man was in love with the beauty of their enemy, the beauty of their colonizers. So when I use this beauty, it's not necessarily that one is in love with white women. That is one of them, because his, we know many examples. Whenever a black man marries a white woman, it's very different to when a white man marries a black woman. You know, the offspring of a child born from a white male and a black woman um, tend to 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 generally, you know, uh, uh, follow their white lineage as the superior choice. So without really getting too deep into that, because people can argue, make different examples, but what we know is that historically, white males have um, a rate may had offspring with black women for years. Asians started it in the destruction of black civilization. It is one of the pillars of the destruction of black civilization, which the grandmaster um, author Chancellor Williams uh, calls in the chapter. He calls the chapter the mulatto problem, and he shows how the Asians used, especially in the matrilineal system, where inheritance came through the mother, they took advantage of that system to take black women with the royal blood, and in order to install their seed that would be their patriarchal seed, would then, when the son is born, he becomes then the king through his mother, and therefore uh, they bring in, obviously, as the dominant people who have dominated the region, they then give privileges to these mixed groups, so that they never loyal to their black side, because naturally, without them manipulating, they would obviously want to be loyal to their mother side because of the royal blood. But since that royalty is not really in effect, it's just there in terms of bloodline. Since these people have been colonized, they are in charge of deciding who gets to die. So therefore, for a better and more comfortable life, you'd rather choose to be with closer to the dominant side. So, but it is very different when now when a black man populates with a white woman. Generally, that leads to, I mean, we can look, I'll use South Africa as the example where we come from, where I live. We have a buffer race called the colored people. I know the term was taken from the United States. It's just used differently. In the United States, I believe colored was just meant, uh, as far as I understand, it meant people of color, or generally all black people. What I know is that I don't know if originally it was like that, but I know at one stage all black people were colored people, which means basically people of color. When they brought it this side, they said no. Um, if you mixed with a bit of white, you're no longer black, you're no longer white, so you stay in the center. But until today, colored people, they love black culture, obviously. So they dress like us. They like pantsulas. If you don't know what a pantula is, to look into that. Some cool urban culture in South Africa, and the slang, and they copy all of that from us and all. But when it comes to the social settings and the corporates and all that, they're more loyal to, they tend to gravitate towards the white people. So in essence, they benefit because they actually in this buffer zone, they fight in this battle, whatever battle. If we talk about land, who owns land, they'll step in the middle and say, no, it's we are the indigenous people, and blah blah blah. Don't want to get into that. Might take us off topic. So uh, we can so the appetite that a black person has or the African has. I even have a tweet. What Africans got for their slaves is I titled it like that. I never call Africans slaves. It's just the title of the the, the journal that I was basing the tweet on, and I put it in inverted commas. Um, because we were never slaves, we were enslaved. There is a difference. So in that tweet, I actually did, because for a while before I made the tweet, I've been trying to explain to people. I even had a really nice and friendly debate with one brother here on Twitter, on Space actually, about the fact that we as Africans were never really dominated on the battlefield at all. So the question, because it's often assumed based on the modern reality that, well, when a white man wants to dominate a black man, a couple of policemen with their guns, and you see the United States flying into a certain area and attacking and bombing. So people tend to look at that and think that's how Africa was taken, but that couldn't be further from the truth. And in that discussion, I've given various examples, so I don't really want to go back in there. But with the brother that I debated, it ended up not being a debate. The debate was like 1 minute because he couldn't give examples of battles that we actually lost. And I actually gave an example of the battle that Zulu people lost against the Dutch man, but putting it into perspective because it was a rematch. The Zulus had overpowered the Dutch at one of the battles, and then the Dutch wanted revenge. But obviously, the commander at the time was a bit big-headed and didn't, like his ego, so he didn't really think much of the boys. So he accepted a battle where that involved his soldiers crossing a whole river to go and stab a man with gunpowder. Like that just doesn't make sense. You don't do that. It's just basic. You don't need to be the smartest commander. But I guess ego came into play. It's like, well, what are these guys? We can beat them anyhow. But everybody knows that military geography can make a whole difference. That's why the mighty Shaka Zulu never defeated the Basotho. The Basotho were never really like warriors to that level to really match the Zulu uh, or Shaka Zulu at the time. But the reason why Shaka had failed to defeat them is because of geography. They live in the mountains, so they flee to the mountains where they stay, and they're like, okay, bring it on. And when the Zulu army tried to march up, they started throwing boulders at them. So that is just an impossible situation. So you can even have children throwing boulders from up there. It's not gonna, you don't need really soldiers to win that one. And so anyway, um, so at the end, we actually that's when I came in to explain that we've proven, and I gave multiple examples of how Africans actually dominated um, Europeans, and actually how Europeans used Africans, fellow Africans, like to defeat King Kukune. They used his half brother Mampuru and other group of Africans, including the Dutch and the British, a whole gang up on one man. And he's not the most famous. You can ask any South African; they don't. They know the guy. They know King Mushweshwe. I mean King Skukune of Bapedi, but he is not regarded amongst when you hear his name, they're like, "Whoa, warrior, warrior." But the British do recognize him as such because they they with the Dutch actually failed at one attempt, and then they decided to regroup and replan. So anyway, so coming into this, we see that the whole hypothesis of, because I think it's when we say, oh well, they defeated us because they had guns, that kind of it's an easy conclusion. So we can say, oh well, but then we also have guns today. Everybody has guns now, but you don't really want to take it there. But um, so historically, I've proven that it was an assumption. I also used to have the same assumption until I read The Destruction of Black Civilization, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, I had no idea that we were undefeatable. We just sold out. We it was the masculinity, because in that discussion I actually explained that we had lost Ubuntu. We had actually turned our back on the ways of the ancestors, and that's the price we had to pay. And we still continue to pay the price of turning our backs on the ways of our ancestors, because we still look down upon it. An average black person doesn't think much about our ancestry, our culture. Hence, not very many of us take advantage of the fact that we still have grandfathers and grandmothers walking around. Yeah, I wish I did have my grandmother and grandfather. Unfortunately, never seen my granddad, passed on long before, and my grandma was too young to know what to ask. If it was today, I'd be bothering her. And grandparents love telling stories, so I would have collected quite a rich information. So now I just take advantage of any elder that I can find, and they look at me funny, like, this young man. They're not used to that. Their grandchildren don't care, you know. So, so the masculinity part in African culture, a young man is not born a man. You're not. A woman is a woman. You They don't have to undergo anything to be called a woman, and that can be justified biologically. There's a video where Dr. Amos Wilson is explaining how the biology. I'm sure everybody has learned it in high school. How when a fetus is getting formed inside the mother's womb, they are by default female. It's almost like they female before the penis can actually develop. I don't want to get too deep into that, so I'm just gonna lay it in layman terms. So, so the female, so for a biologically, and just to really summarize it, so we don't get too deep into that, something has to come in to to ensure that, or to for the child to become male, so which is your Y chromosome popping in, because the woman is XX and the man is XY. So the Y is the one that's going to come in and change the whole thing, you know, and all that stuff. So now use that biology, because our ancestors formed customs and practices based on the observing nature